Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. In this video I'd like to show you how to do part 2 of Rozeta. Rozeta is the Scheepjes Crochet Along 2019, designed by Tatjana from Lillebjorn Crochet. Part 2 is this part here. It's this loop, these loops that you're making to the rosette, and you're going to start the center point there. So that's what we're going to do in part 2. That's this band here. I have an Our Tribe kit. That means I'm using Scheepjes Our Tribe yarn, and I'm using this together with a 3.5mm hook. If you have a color crafter kit, you will need a 4mm hook. And just do keep track of which yarn color you're using when, that you're using the correct colors as we go through the pattern. I'll show you step by step each and every yarn color change, every stitch of every repeat for entire part 2. Thank you for watching. I hope it's a useful video for you. Round 15. You're currently in this 2 together stitch here from part 1. Start with a chain 2. This is not a stitch. And in the same stitches where you're currently in, work 2 trebles. So that's 1 and 2, and now we're going to take off with a new color yarn. This is yarn D, if I recall correctly. Yes, yarn D. So no matter which kit you have, yarn D is the one you need right now. And take off. There we go. So now I have yarn D on my hook. I'm going to work. Here you have 11 stitches, work 1 treble on each of those, so 11 trebles. So this is going to, and then still take that green yarn with you to the back. So this is 1, 2, and 3. This is 3 and 4. Continue until you have 11. 11 will bring you here, so I'm just going to work all of these stitches. And here is number 11. There we go. And that's treble 11. And then I'm going to change back to yarn A. On these 5 stitches here in yarn A, work a treble on each. So this round is actually, well, relatively easy compared to other rounds we've done. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and here work number 5 on that last stitch. And now we're going to change back to yarn D. I'm going to repeat here again 11 trebles, so 1 treble on each stitch. So this is the same as on. This is the same as here. So that's 1, 2, 3, and this is treble 11 again, and change to yarn A. There we go. We now have these 3 stitches here in yarn A. On the first you're going to work 2 trebles, then 1 treble in the middle, and 2 again on the last one. 2 trebles on the first, 2, 1 treble in the middle, and 2 trebles on the last stitch. Well, actually now you've finished the repeat. This is the end of the repeat unit. So the next stitch, here these 2 trebles I'm going to do here, are part of the next repeat unit. So that's 1, and here's number 2, and now I'm going to change yarn back to yarn D. And these 2 stitches that I just did there are the same as those 2 that we started with. So you can see how I've already started the next repeat with you. So this is the full repeat. Do that all the way around, and here you're going to, when you finish, you have 2 trebles on the first stitch, 1 treble here in the middle, and then close on your first stitch with a slip stitch. Round 16. In this round the repeat is going to become shorter. Up to now you've done a repeat 6 times in total. Now we're going to be doing 12 times, so you're going to be working half, the repeat is going to be half the size of the previous round. You're going to again start with a chain 2. This is not a stitch. In the first 2 stitches work a treble. So where you're currently at, work a treble over the thread from yarn D that you've taken up, and in the next stitch also work a treble, and then change colors to yarn D. And there we go. Now over these next stitches excuse me, over these next stitches going to work 5 trebles, a treble 2 together, and then 4 trebles. So on the first 5 stitches work a treble in each. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is 5. And now we work a treble 2 together over the next 2 stitches. That's 1 and 2, and then take them off. You have 4 stitches left, work a treble on each of those. So that's 1, 2, 3, and this is 4, and now we change to yarn A again. There we go. Oh, sorry, with yarn A. I sometimes got confused with the A and the D. In the next 3 stitches work a treble. So that's 1, 2, and 3, but now change colors back to D, and now work 1 treble, only the 1, and then we swap back immediately, 1 treble in the same stitch with yarn D, so only the 1 stitch in the same position, and then swap back to yarn A again. And then work another treble in the same position. So you've worked 3 trebles in that center stitch. So you had here these 5 stitches. That center one you have 3 trebles, and it's a green one, a purple one, and a green one. So color D, A, D. And that is the end of the repeat unit. So now we're going to start the next repeat unit. You had these 2 trebles here. You're going to work them there. So here you have 1 treble, and then work the second, and then change to yarn D again. So I've now started the second repeat unit with you. So you need to do this 11 more times. So here you're going to work 5 trebles, then a treble 2 together, and then 4 trebles. Then you work, well, you basically work 2, and then here in the middle you work 1, 1, 1, and those 3 colors, or 2 colors, 3 stitches, and then work a treble on the last 2 again. So you can see how this is your repeat unit here. Repeat this all the way around, and after you've done your last 3 stitches in that last stitch, close on the first with a slip stitch. Round 17, I'm going to start with the chain 2 again, which is now a stitch. Then on the stitch you're currently in with the chain 2, work a treble just the one treble. And then in the next stitch, that's the last stitch here in the green, work 2 trebles. So 1, and 2, and now change colors to yarn D. There we go, yarn D. On the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches, you're going to work a treble 2 together, and then in between you work 6 trebles. So on the first 2 stitches we work a treble 2 together, take them off. Now on the next 6 stitches work a treble. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trebles, and you have 2 stitches left. You work a treble 2 together over those 2. So 1, 2, and now we're going to change colors with the taking off the loops. And now you have color A on your hook. In the next stitch work 2 trebles. So that's the first green stitch there, work 2 trebles. So 1, 2, and you're going to have 2 green stitches there before I get here to the purple, and those 2 green work a treble on each. So 1, 2, and I'll change colors to yarn D. The next stitch, that is this stitch here in color D, work 2 trebles on that stitch. 1, 2, and then we change back to color A. Now we've got the repeat almost done, because on the next stitch you work 1 treble, and now you're at the end of the repeat. So the next repeat starts here with the next treble, and then here in the last stitch you work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and then you change colors back to yarn D. You can see here how you've done the repeat. So those last 3 stitches are part of the new repeat unit. So this we do 11 more times. And then here, after you've done your last few stitches, you've worked the 2 trebles there in the 1 stitch from yarn D, then 1 more treble in the green, and then close on the first stitch. Round 18, we start again with the chain 2. And then in the first 3 stitches we make a treble. So those are these 3 stitches here, the stitch you're currently in, and the next 2. You make 1 treble in each. So 1, 2, and on the 3rd stitch you're going to change colors to yarn D. On the next 8 stitches, work a treble. This round does have just less increases than previous rounds. This is 3, this is 4, 7, and the last one here on the last stitch here is 8, and then we change back to yarn A. There we go. With yarn A, I'm going to work 4 trebles. So on these 4 stitches, work a treble on each. 1, 2, 3. Here's stitch number 4, and again change colors to yarn A. Oh, sorry, yarn D. There we go. Now we are going to work an increase. So on the first stitch we work 1 treble, and then on the second stitch you work 2. So 1, 2, and then change colors back to yarn A. And now on these 4 stitches work a treble on each. So that's 1 treble, and now you're at the end of the repeat unit. So I'm going to work 3 more trebles, and these are from the start of the next repeat. So 2, 3, and this is 4, and then I change this back to yarn D. There we go. That's your repeat unit plus a few stitches. So up to there, that's your repeat unit. So now you're going to work 8 trebles again, then 4 trebles, and then do the little increase here. Go all the way around, and then close on your first stitch. We're just at the end of round 18. I've just worked that last treble. Going to close with a slip stitch on the first stitch. So it's going to be this stitch here. I'll bring the other yarn up. But now, so that's the slip stitch join. Now we're just going to be, we're going to basically work a slip stitch in the stitch before. We're going to rotate your work, or turn your work, so you have the back side facing, the back side of your work facing. And now make a slip stitch in the next stitch. This is of course the last stitch you worked. And now turn your work back, front side facing. And now you've gone 1 stitch backwards. And now we're ready to work round 19. So this was just to go back 1 stitch. So round 19, currently then in the first of those 4 stitches, and remember that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. So I'm just going to start again with a chain 2. This is again not a stitch. And now we're going to work a treble 2 together over the first 2 positions, and this looks a little messy, but don't worry, in your blanket you won't notice that. So I'm going to yarn over, and then here in the first stitch, now that's where the slip stitch is in and where you started. So in that first position there, take the first leg, and then yarn over, and you come to the second stitch. It's that one, because you remember you're not going to do that chain 2, so that next stitch. Going to take off 2, and then 3 loops on your hook, which you're going to take off. So that's your first treble 2 together. 1 treble in the next stitch, and then in the following stitch, that's the last one here before you get to the next color, going to do 2 trebles in there. So 1 and 2, and now we change colors again to yarn D. For yarn D, over the first 2 stitches work a treble 2 together. 1, 2, take them off, then 4 trebles, so that's 1 in each of the next 4 stitches, still covering the yarn that you're not using. So 3, and this is 4 trebles. You have 2 stitches left, work a treble 2 together over those 2 stitches. So 1, and here's the last one. Your last yarn over you're going to do with yarn A, so we're going to switch back to yarn A. You have 4 stitches here in yarn A, going to work 2 trebles on the first stitch, and 2, then in the next stitch you work 1 treble, the last 2 you work a treble 2 together, and the second leg here. And again, when you do your last yarn over, we're going to switch back to yarn D. For yarn D you have 3 stitches here in the middle, and you're going to work 2 trebles on each of those. So you're going to work 6 stitches here. So 2 trebles on each of those 3 stitches. So that's 1. This is the second time, so I'm going to work 2 trebles in the second stitch. And I need some more yarn, and again on the third one here, 2 trebles. So 1. And on your last yarn over, on your last yarn over, switch to yarn A. Now you've done the repeat all the way around. I'll just start the next repeat with you so you can just see how you're going to start here. Because remember, this was the same as this bit here that was maybe just a little messy. So on the first 2 stitches you work a treble 2 together. So 1, 2, which you're going to take off. On the following stitch you work 1 treble, and here on the last stitch you work 2. So 1 and 2, and that second one change back to yarn D. There you go. So that was the repeat unit from here to here, or if you move up like that. So this is your repeat unit. You're going to go all the way around, and here at the end, after you've worked your last 3 stitches, so 2 trebles in each of those, switch to yarn A and then close on that first stitch, on that treble 2 together with a slip stitch, and this time no turning or swapping, you can just close on that stitch. Round 20, you have color A here that you made the slip stitch with. I'm going to continue with color A, and the first 3 stitches work a treble. But of course we start with a chain 2, which is not a stitch. So in that first stitch work a treble, in the second, and also in the third. In the last stitch there, that 4th stitch, you work 2 trebles. 1. And then we swap colors to yarn D. There we go. Over the first 2 and the last 2 stitches, you're going to work a treble 2 together, and then in the middle you work 2 trebles. So the first 2 stitches, treble 2 together. Then on the next 2 stitches work 1 treble. That's 1, and 1 treble on the next. And on those last 2, work a treble 2 together. So 1, 2, and then we swap to yarn A again. There we go. Now in yarn A, 2 trebles on the first stitch. So 1 and 2. So 2 trebles in that first stitch. On the next 3, work 1 treble in each. So 1, 2, and here number 3, we're going to just swap colors again to yarn D. There we go. Work 3 trebles, so 1 in each. So 1 treble, then 1 in the next, and 1 in the next. So on the first 3 stitches you've worked 1 treble. In the next stitch you're going to work 2 trebles. So 1, 2. You have 2 stitches left here in yarn D, work a treble on each. So 1, there you go, 1 and 1 last treble, and then we swap to yarn A. And there we go. And that is your entire repeat unit there, because this here is the same as that. So you're going to start here with 3 trebles, so 1 on each of the first 3 stitches, and then in that 4th stitch you work 2 trebles. Well, repeat this 11 more times, and here after you've worked your last stitches in yarn D, swap to yarn A again and close with a slip stitch in yarn here on this in yarn A on that first stitch. If you have a color crafter kit, you can cut yarn D at the end of this round because you're going to change to yarn E. If you have our tribe kit, just leave this yarn attached. We're just going to continue. Round 21. This round the repeat is a bit longer, so you're going to be doing the repeat 6 times and not 12 times. So a longer repeat in this round. We start with chain 2, which is not a stitch. In the first 5 stitches work a treble. So for me it's on the green stitches, so on all your yarn A stitches you work a treble. Just 2, 3, 4, and this here is number 5, and then we change colors. I'm going to change to yarn D because I have the Our Tribe version. If you have the Color Crafter, you're going to change to yarn E. So yarn E for Color Crafter, you just continue with yarn D if you have the Our Tribe. In the next stitch, work a treble. Over the following 2, a treble 2 together. So 1, 1, take them off. And in the last stitch here, work a treble. And swap back to yarn A. See how you're bringing this pattern to a point here. The next 5 stitches in yarn A work a treble. That's 1. I just need a bit more yarn here. My yarn is a bit, there we go, not cooperating. 1. And this is 2. and the last one here is 5. And change back to yarn D or E. Over the next few stitches we're going to be working, going to start a new point with yarn A. So in the first stitch work 2 trebles in yarn A, yarn D. That's 1 and 2, so 2 trebles in yarn D or E, and then a treble in the next 3 stitches. That's 1, 2 and 3. And on this third stitch you're going to change colors to yarn A. Now with yarn A we're only going to make 1 stitch, and that's going to be a treble in the same position. So where you're already at, you're going to work a treble. So in that same position. And then we swap again to yarn D or E if you have the color crafter. So only this 1 stitch here. In the next stitches, the next 2, work a treble. 1 and 1. Then here in the last stitch, I'm going to work 2 trebles. 1 and 2, and then when you take off, swap again to yarn A. For the next 5 stitches, work a treble. That's 1, 2, 3. This here is 4, and the last one here is 5. And now we're going to swap back to yarn D or E, depending on which kit you have. There we go. Then a treble 2 together, and a treble here in these next stitches. On the first one you work a treble. On the next 2 you work a treble 2 together. Which you take off. And here on the last stitch you work a treble. And then you again swap back to yarn A. So a lot of small pieces with one color and then the other. There we go. You have here 5 stitches. Won't surprise you, you're going to work a treble on each of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the last one. It's 5, which you again swap back to yarn D or E. There we go. And the last bit before we get to the end of the repeat, I'm going to work 3 trebles in yarn E or D, whichever you have. So it's 1, 2, 3 trebles. In the next stitch you work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and in the last 3 stitches here you work a treble on each, so that's 3 trebles. and this here is 2, and here's the last one, 3. And then you change back to yarn A. And there we go. And this is the repeat. I'm just going to zoom out a bit so you can really see the full repeat. Because it is a rather long repeat. You see we started here. So this is the full repeat. You're going to do this 5 more times. You can see here that 2 of your points you're bringing together here. You've added one little stitch there from yarn A. And this one you've left undone. You can see this one is growing and that one's growing too. But you've added that stitch there, and here these 2 are coming to a point. So this little one stitch, make sure it's only every second piece. So it's here, but it's not here. So it is going to be here again. So that way, just make sure your color placements are correct. So in this round, just keep track of how you're changing your colors. So this is the repeat. Do this 5 more times. Round 22. This round we're again going to be working a repeat of 6 times. Chain 2, which is not a stitch. Then over the first 2 stitches, going to work a treble 2 together. Here in the first stitch, so that's where you made the chain 2. And then yarn over and come to the next position. 3 loops on your hook, you take them off. Over the next 2 stitches, make a treble in each. So that's 1 and 2. And then here in the last position, make 2 trebles. That is 1 and just before you finish the stitch, you change colors to yarn D or E, depending on your kit. You have here 3 stitches. On these 3 stitches, going to work a treble 3 together. So that means 3 trebles worked together. So I'm going to do a yarn over in the first stitch. And take off 2 loops. Then come to the second stitch. Take off 2 loops. And again come to the third stitch. Take off 2 loops. You have 4 loops on your hook, which you're going to take off in one go, but we're going to swap to yarn A. Take them off in one go. There we go. In the first stitch, work 2 trebles. So this is mirror image to that side. So in the first stitch, work 2 trebles. 1 and 2. Then 1 treble on each of the next 2 stitches. So that's 1 and 2. Then here on these last 2 stitches, work a treble 2 together. So 1 and 2, which we're going to take off with yarn D. There we go. Or yarn E, depending on your kit. There we go. Now for yarn D here, I'm going to work 2 trebles in the first stitch. That's 1, 2 trebles. And then the next 4 stitches work 1 treble on each. So 1, 2, This here is number 4, which you then swap to yarn A. The next little stitch, that's that one stitch in yarn A, going to work 2 trebles in there. 1 and 2, so just before you complete 2 you swap again to yarn D. This side is going to work slightly different than that side because we have 1 stitch less. So we're going to start by working 3 trebles in the first stitches, so 1 1 1. So 1 stitch on the first 3. That's 1 stitch, 1 stitch, and I need some more yarn. And 1, and then here on the last position you're going to work 2 trebles. 1 and 2, and then we just take off that loop with yarn A. There we go. I'm going to rotate my work here because my circle is getting nice and big already. So on the next stitches with yarn A, going to start with the treble 2 together. One, and then come to the next position and take off 2. 3 loops on your hook, which you're going to take off in one go. Then on the center 2 stitches, work a treble in each. That's 1 treble and 1 treble, and then here in the last stitch you work 2 trebles. So 1 and 2, but of course you take that off with yarn D. Have here again 3 stitches. On those 3 work a treble 3 together. So this is the same as on the other one. 1, 2, 3, and then you take them off with yarn A. And I just need to get my hand on my yarn. There we go. And take them off. Now on this side, I'm going to do the same as you did there. So I'm going to start with 2 trebles in the first stitch. So this is again mirrored. So it's 1 and 2. And on the next 2 stitches, work a treble in each. 1 treble and 1 treble, and here on your last 2 stitches going to work a treble 2 together. So 1 leg, you come to the next stitch, 2, and then you're going to take them all off with yarn D. And the last stretch before we're at the start of the repeat unit again, I'm going to work 2 trebles in the first stitch. So 1, 2 trebles in that first stitch, and then a treble in the next 2, so that's going to be 1 treble, so 1 treble, and 1 treble. Then over the next 2 stitches work a yes, no, sorry, work 2 trebles in the next stitch. Sorry, I was just a bit confused. So you worked 2 in the first stitch and then 1 1, and now here we're going to work 2 again. So sometimes you just need to keep track of your stitches. 2 trebles, and then we're going to work a treble in the next 3 stitches. So that is going to be 1 treble, and then number 2 in the second stitch, and number 3 in the third stitch. There we go. And if all went right, you now have 1 stitch left, and in that last stitch you work 2 trebles. And that was the entire repeat unit, and it's a rather long one. There we go, and that was the entire repeat unit. So you need to do this from here, from this point. You need to do this 5 more times, and then when you get here, after you've worked these last few trebles here, so those last 3 and then 2 in the last stitch, swap to yarn A and close on the first stitch. Round 23, to start with a chain 2, followed by a treble 2 together in the first 2 stitches. So that's the stitch where you're currently in, which is here, and the next stitch. And then take off all 3 loops. Over the next 7 stitches, going to work a treble in each, so 7 trebles. That's 1, 2, this is 3, work 7, and 7. 7 trebles. So really, once you've worked over that point there, you have 2 stitches left. Going to work a treble 2 together on those last 2 stitches, and second leg. And now we change to color D or E, depending on which kit you have, like so. On the next stitches, going to work 2 trebles in the first stitch. 1, 2. 2 trebles in the first stitch. Over the next 5 here, we work a treble in each. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and here the last one is 5, and then we swap back to yarn A. You have 2 stitches here in yarn A. On the first one we work 1 treble. My yarn is a bit fluffy here. There we go. 1 treble, and the second stitch you work 2 trebles. 1 and 2, and then swap back to yarn D. On the stitches on this side, I'm going to start with 2 trebles, 1 on each in the first 2. So that's 1 treble, and in the next stitch also 1 treble. In the following stitch, that's the third stitch here, work 2 trebles. 1, 2, 1 treble in the next stitch, and here in the last stitch going to work 2 trebles. So 1, and I need a bit more yarn, and 2. So in this last position you work 2 trebles, and then you switch back to yarn A. Over this part here we're going to do the same as we did on the other side. So on the first 2 stitches we work a treble 2 together. So 1, 2, take them off, and then on the next 7 stitches you work a treble on each, so 7 trebles in total. So 1, 2, 3, and treble number 7. There we go, 7 trebles. For the next 2 stitches work a treble 2 together. That's 1, 2, and you're going to take them all off and swap to yarn D. You've got a whole stretch of stitches here. It's the last bit before we get to the start of the next repeat unit. I'm going to start with 2 in the first stitch, work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and now on the next 9 stitches work a treble in each. It's quite a longer stretch, so that's 1 and 2, 3, and treble number 9. There we go, 9 trebles. You have 1 stitch left, and this last stitch you work 2 trebles. That's 1 and 2, and then you swap back to yarn A. And there we go. And now you're at the start of the repeat unit again. So here you're going to start with a treble 2 together, and then work the 7 trebles, treble 2 together, and everything. So this is quite a stretch here. It starts at this point here. So you're going to repeat 5 more times, and after you've worked your last 2 trebles, swap to yarn A, and then close with a slip stitch. Round 24. To start with a chain 2. This is not a stitch, and then starting off very similar actually to what we've done in round 23. We're going to start with a treble 2 together and end with a treble 2 together, and in the middle we make 5 trebles. So starting with a treble 2 together, and in the next stitch take them off, followed by 5 trebles. That's 1, 2, I just need more yarn, 2, 3, 4, and that last treble here is 5 trebles, and on your last 2 stitches a treble 2 together. 1, 2, and then you swap colors to yarn D or E. In the first stitch, we make 2 trebles, and then we make 1 on each of the next 6 stitches. So in the first one make 2 trebles. 1, 2, and then a treble on the next 6. 1, 2, 3, this is 4, 5, and the last one here, 6, which we then again use to change colors to yarn A. We're making a few increases here in yarn A. On the first stitch we work 2 trebles. 1, 2. In the next stitch work 1 treble, so that's the center stitch of the 3. You work 1 treble. And here in the last stitch work 2 trebles again. 1, 2, and then swap colors to yarn A, from yarn A to yarn D. This side is very similar to that side, but it's in a mirror image, so we're going to start with 6 trebles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the last one here, 6. 6 trebles, 1 on each. 1 stitch left, and there you work 2 trebles, and then we swap colors again. 1, 2, and we change colors to yarn A. On these stitches we work the same pattern as here in the beginning. So we start with a treble 2 together. 1, 1, and take them off. 5 trebles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 trebles, and over the last 2 stitches a treble 2 together. 1, 2, and then you swap colors to yarn D. And last part of the repeat, my work is getting quite big, so I need to keep on moving it to keep it in front of the camera. In the first stitch we work 2 trebles. Oh wait, and of course not with yarn A, but with yarn D we work 2 trebles. 1, 2, 2 trebles, and now followed by 11 trebles, and that's going to bring you here to the other side. So we work 11 trebles. That's 1, 2, 3, continue until you have 11, 4, and 11. Go. 11 trebles. You have 1 stitch left. On this stitch you work 2 trebles. 1 and 2, and you swap back to yarn A. Now you're at the beginning of the next repeat, so here you're going to start with a treble 2 together again. So everything we've just done, do this all the way around, so you need 5 more repeats. And after your last 2 trebles here, swap to yarn A and then close with a slip stitch on that first stitch. Round 25. I'm going to start again with a chain 2, as always. Then in the first 3 stitches a treble. 1, 2, and 3. And then on this third stitch we're going to change colors, because here in the middle we're going to make a stitch or 2 with yarn D. In the next stitch make 2 stitches with yarn D and then swap back to yarn A. That's 1, 2, so in that one position, and then again back to yarn A. On the next 3 stitches with yarn A, make a treble on each, so 3 trebles. 1, 2, and then we swap colors here on the last stitch. 3, and we swap colors. There we go. So that was the first little bit of the repeat. On these stitches, on the next stitches from yarn D, you're going to start with 6 trebles. 1. So on the first stitches, take your thread with you, there we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 trebles, 2 stitches left, and those 2 we work a treble 2 together. 1, and then the next stitch. Now we're going to take off all the loops, but we're switching to yarn A. There we go. Here we're again going to be working just a few stitches and then we swap back to yarn D. There's going to be a lot of swapping in this round. So in the first stitch we work 2 trebles. 1, 2 trebles, and then the next stitch work 1, and then we swap. Now we swap to yarn D, and then just work the 1 stitch, just 1, in the next position. So in the next stitch, and then swap back to yarn A, so it's really just the 1 stitch. 2 stitches in, you have 2 stitches available for yarn A. In the first one you work 1 treble, and then in the second one, oh, my yarn is just rolling over the table, and in that second stitch you work 2 trebles. And then we swap to yarn D again. 1, 2, and I need yarn D. There we go. No, there we don't. Yes, here. There. So now you've got yarn D on your hook again. So for this side, I'm going to start with a treble 2 together. 1, 2, 2, which you're going to take off, followed by 6 trebles, so 1 on every stitch here on this little stretch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here on number 6 is the last one, and then you're going to change colors to yarn A. And some of the reason my yarns don't want to cooperate today. On these stitches, going to do the same as on the other side. So we're going to start with 3 trebles in yarn A. 1, 2, 3 trebles in yarn A. Then we swap to yarn D or E, dependent on your kit. In the next stitch, work 2 trebles with yarn D. 1, that's 2, and then we swap to yarn A again. And on the next 3 stitches, work a treble in yarn A. 1, 2, and here the last one, 3, and then we swap to yarn D. The next stitches, here there's quite a stretch, it's 15 stitches, work a treble on each. So you're going to work 15 trebles, 1 on every stitch. Starting here in the first one, so 1, 2, and continue until you have 15, 3, 14, here's the last one, 15, and we swap, where is it, to yarn A. There we go. So you've now done those 15 trebles. And this is the start of the next repeat unit. So everything we've just done, starting here from these little stitches, this entire stretch, do this 5 more times. And after your last 15 trebles, swap to yarn A and then close on that first stitch. Round 26. You start with a chain 2, as always. In the first stitch, that was where we're currently in, going to make 2 trebles. That's 1 and 2. 2 trebles in that first stitch. Then on the next 2 stitches you make 1 treble in each, and then we swap to yarn D. So 1, 2, now we change colors. There we go. On the next 2 stitches, so those are in yarn D, you're going to make 1 treble in the first stitch and 2 in the second. So 1, and then in the next stitch you make 2 trebles, and then we change colors again. One, 2, and we change colors. On the next stitches, these 3 trebles, do the same as on the other side. So we start with a treble in the first 2. That's It's 1 and 1. And then here in the last stitch we work 2 trebles. 1 and 2, and then we swap colors to yarn D. A few stitches here in yarn D. On the first 2 we work a treble 2 together, and also on the last 2. And in the middle you have 3 trebles, going to work a treble on each of those. Now followed by 3 trebles. So 1, 2, 3 trebles, and then on the last 2 stitches work a treble 2 together. 1, 2, and then change colors to yarn A. Here in the first stitch we work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and in the next 2 stitches work 1 treble on each. 1, 2, and change colors. There we go. You now have 1 stitch here, and that 1 stitch we're going to work 1 treble, so it's just the 1 stitch, and then we immediately going to swap back to yarn A, so this is just the 1 stitch. Then treble in the next 2 stitches. That's 1 and 2, and then here in the last stitch going to work 2 trebles in that 1 position. 1 and on 2 we're going to swap to yarn D or E. There we go. Going to start again on the first 2 and the last 2 we work a treble 2 together, and in the middle we work 3 trebles. Treble 2 together, followed by 3 trebles. So that's 1, 2, 3, 3 trebles, and here in the last 2 stitches, I just rotate my work a bit. In those last 2 stitches you work a treble 2 together, and then you change colors back to yarn A. There we go. And then we change to yarn A. And then we're going to work a similar bit as before. There we go. In the first stitch we work 2 trebles. So that's 1 and 2. And on the next 2 stitches we work 1 treble in each. So 1 and 1, and then we change colors to yarn D. In the first stitch work 1 treble, and in the second stitch work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and then we change colors to yarn A. Yarn A, on this side the same as on that side, which means in the first 2 stitches you work 1 treble on each. So 1, 1, and in the last stitch work 2 trebles. 1, 2, and then we're going to change yarn again to yarn D, and then on the long stretch here I'm going to do the last part of the repeat. I'm going to start with a treble 2 together. So on the first 2 and the last 2 we work a treble 2 together. In the middle it's 11 trebles. So it's a treble 2 together. So now we're going to work 11 trebles, which will bring you to the other side. It's 1, this is 2, and here comes 3, continue until you have 11, 4, that's treble 11, there we go, so 11 trebles, with 2 stitches left, work a treble 2 together, so 1, 2, and then swap again to yarn A. There we go. And that is the full repeat unit. So everything we've just done. So it's a nice symmetric round this round. So do that 5 more times. And after your last treble 2 together, you're going to change to yarn A, so you have that loop on your hook again, and then you close there with a slip stitch. When you finish round 26, this is what your work looks like. It's beautifully large rosettes already. At this point you can cut yarn D, so I've already done that here. You can cut yarn D, that's this one, or E, depending on which kit you have. You can cut this yarn and work away this yarn tail. Leave yarn A, for me that's the green yarn, leave that one attached. Now, let's just quickly talk about size. Where are you at the moment? If you have the Out Tribe kit like I have, you should be at about 52 centimeters diameter. If you have the Color Crafter, you're at about 58. Let's just quickly have a look and see where we're at. So through the middle here, and there is, I think you just, I can't see it, I'm just out of view here. It is actually just a bit too big for the camera. And there and through here, and I am at, where am I? Need to go through the middle here. I'm at about 52, 53, and about somewhere around there. Really depends on how you pull. If you just pull it slightly more, it'll become larger, of course. So let's just take a measurement here. I'm trying not to pull it because that's important, because then you're gonna stretch it and then it looks larger than it is. If I make an effort not to stretch it in any way, I am at exactly 52.5 centimeters. 52, that's good enough for me. So don't go about stretching it. So really unblocked, unstretched, in other words, it's at 52 centimeters for the Out Tribe and 58 for the Color Crafter. So that's about the size that you're aiming for. So just double check that you're still on gauge in that sense. Brings us to the end of part 2, and this is where your rosette is at the moment, and next time in part 3 we'll grow her even larger.